several months before, we already were talking to Gucci, and they were very much interested in this concept of using AI to help their own call centers, their own service centers. And we worked together in what we called the Gucci voice. Essentially, the idea is that we can use AI to empower the client advisors with a distinctive voice, which is the Gucci voice.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome to AI and the Future of Work, episode 295. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. If you enjoy what we do, please tell a friend and give us a like and a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you leave a comment, I'll be sure to share it in an upcoming episode. I like this one from Kumar in Hyderabad, who says, he looks forward to this pod dropping each week, and he prefers listening to it on the treadmill to his old standby Ravi Shankar. I have been called many things over the years, but never a replacement for Ravi Shankar. Thank you, Kumar. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show, and the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact. Brian Calvert writes in Vox that AI already uses as much energy as a small country, and it's only just beginning. According to the International Energy Agency, the combined energy consumption of data centers, cryptocurrency, and AI represented about 2% of global energy demand in 2022. And this demand could double by 2026, roughly equaling the electricity usage of Japan. Larger models consume more energy for both training as well as inference. We should consider when and how smaller models are equally effective. For example, training GPT-3 consumed around 1,300 megawatt hours of electricity, which is equivalent to the annual consumption of about 130 US households. Another approach is only using generative AI when truly generative output is required. Generative AI using LLMs can increase energy usage by 30 to 40 times versus alternate AI techniques. We haven't talked enough about the environmental impact of AI, but we will be focusing on that more in upcoming episodes. Of course, we'll link to that full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to today's conversation. Silvio Savarese is a pioneer and an AI research lead with the AI research team at one of the largest and most influential enterprise software companies on the planet. You might have heard of it. It's called Salesforce. Silvio spent nearly 11 years in academia at Stanford before joining Salesforce in 2021 as executive vice president and chief scientist. His previous research focused on robotics, machine learning, and language models. At Salesforce, Silvio's team has developed AI tools like CodeGen to assist with coding using conversational AI, and Merlion for time series intelligence to improve system availability by detecting potential failures. His team's also working on conversational AI for personalized summaries. Silvio is a strong advocate for practicing AI responsibly, which has led to Salesforce becoming one of the most vocal advocates for AI trust, safety, privacy, and security. To learn more, go back in the archives of this podcast and listen to my discussion with Kai Nunez, Salesforce VP of Research and Insights from Season 2. Seems like a long time ago. We'll link to that one in the show notes. Without further ado, Silvio, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI and the Future of Work. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and how you get into the space.
Yeah, hi Dan. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this great podcast. Yes, as you mentioned, I've been in this space for quite some time. I joined Salesforce 3 years ago. I was professor of computer science for almost 15 years. The last stint was in Stanford. I was leading a group of researchers and scientists for various topics in academia, including machine learning, machine vision, natural language processing, robotics. And then 3 years ago, I had an opportunity to join Salesforce. And since then, I've been running the AI research organizations as a chief scientist. It's a great honor to leading such a top-notch organizations, which comprises really a talented group of researchers, research engineers, product managers. And it's been a very exciting journey so far.
There's a lot of academics or former academics, reformed academics on this podcast. And I'm always curious to know, how was the transition for you from academia to industry?
Yeah, transition has been definitely an interesting step for my career. And in general, in academia, the scope of research work as a faculty is rather limited in scope, if you wish. So when I was in Stanford, I focused on machine vision, robotics, machine learning, as I said. At Salesforce, the scope of my organization is much broader. And we span from natural language processing to language model to time series to AI software, process automations, foundational models. So there is much larger variation of topics to handle. And in a way, following trends and stay up to date on the most recent techniques can be challenging. Another challenge is about the structure about the organizations. So a typical size of research group in academia is 10, 15 students, researchers, postdocs. And my group at Stanford back then was around 20 students. And the size of the group is pretty much functional, how much faculty can raise. But this is a simple organization. It's flat. It has a very simple objective function, publish papers, and work on first-in-class research. At Salesforce, the team is larger. There are researchers, there are engineers, there are product managers. So this adds a lot of more complexity to the operationals. And also another big difference is that in academia, the PI has full decision power on the research agenda. In industry, it's important to align the agenda to the business needs. So our AI research organization doesn't really operate in a vacuum, and it needs to respond and react to the requirements of our product roadmap. It's important that our work has still a lot of scientific values. We still do a lot of best class research, at the same time, we need to make work that is relevant and brings values to the company.
So building on that theme, your boss, Mark Benioff, is legendary for growing an organization that's very values-based. And yeah, every 3 months, he's got to get in front of Wall Street and report earnings numbers. How have you navigated the challenge of perhaps unlike academia being driven by an organization with commercial interests while still pursuing your work of advancing the science of AI?
Yeah, so this is a good question. So as I mentioned, an important mission of AI research is to develop new AI innovations that can help Salesforce to innovate in their products and technology roadmap. And the way I organize the research organizations at Salesforce is to operate around three major pillars. One what we call the foundational and basic research contributions. Another one is what we call product incubations. Another one is called product innovation. So let me start a little bit from the first one. In the first pillars, we really focus on developing fundamental research in the area I mentioned earlier, machine learning, machine vision. And over the year, we produce an incredible number of influential papers that go published in top tiers academic and research venues. In fact, some of the seminal work that is currently used in GPT technology came from this very group. We also produce a large body of software that has been open sourced and can be shared with the industry and academic community. And some of this work has been now popular in some repositories such as Hugging Faces or GitHub. Actually, I want to mention one recent example is our own embedding model that has been scoring in the first place in the leaderboard in a very popular leaderboard site for quite some time. So it's just as a testament of the kind of work we're doing. So this is all foundational work, right? This is research work. The output is papers, it's patents, is open source. Then another area of investment is what we call the incubation. So incubation is about all the work, all this research work that goes into prototypes, into proof of concept. And these are usually done in partnership with our customers. So we talk to a customer and we say, look, what are your pain points? What is that we really want to, what is that, what is that can bring value to your business? We can help. So then we listen to the customers, we understand their needs, and we work together on this proof of concept. And one recent example, it was this partnership with Gucci, which started almost 2 years ago, before this whole ChatGPT took the world by storm. Before, several months before, we already were talking to Gucci, and they were very much interested in this concept of using AI to help their own call centers, their own service centers. And we worked together in what we called the Gucci voice. Essentially, the idea is that we can use AI to empower the client advisors with a distinctive voice, which is the Gucci voice. And this is about enhancing this conversation with the Gucci, the history of Gucci, the culture of Gucci, when their own customers they were asking questions about their products. And this actually helps has resulted into a very successful collaboration. And after our prototype, our proof of concept was delivered to them and they started using it, they reported a fairly significant uplift in conversion rates, actually something close to 30%. And this is an example where actually this kind of early partnership led to a successful outcome. And now actually Gucci was later considered as the customer zero for generative AI for Salesforce. But this is the incubation. Then the third pillar is product innovation. So in this case, our research work goes straight to the products and to the engineering work that is currently in the roadmap for Salesforce. And we have a number of examples of how our technology has been deployed. For instance, one example you mentioned earlier, our own LLM, CodeGen, is powering a current tool for helping developers to be more productive, more effective. There is also many other features that have been deployed in our current Einstein 1 platform that Salesforce has produced.
So I mentioned in your bio that you have a background in robotics. I'm curious to know, when you're developing AI to, let's say, power, we'll call them silicon-based life forms, instead of what you're doing now with enterprise software powering carbon-based life forms, humans, what's the difference between how you think about AI and maybe also what has your background in robotics done to inform or kind of influence your perspectives on using AI for enterprise software?
Yeah, this is a great question. And actually, I've been thinking about that for quite some time. This has been one of my thoughts process in this period, in this phase of my career at Salesforce. So at Stanford, one segment of my research agenda, as I mentioned, was on robotics. And we built in-house robots that can learn social behavior, they can learn social manners from humans. We designed algorithms that led the robots to perform complex tasks, such as cooking an omelette or making an espresso. This is some application we were testing back then. And it's very interesting that in many of these techniques that are powering these capabilities can be transferred or adopted in a space of enterprise software. In robotics, teaching a robot to cook an omelette means teaching a robot to perform a number of tasks, a sequence of tasks. Take the eggs from the fridge, track them, mix them in the oil, fry the eggs, and so on, right? So this is a series of actionable steps that may succeed or may fail and require some adjustment along the way. It's a flow, it's a process, right? So if you at some point you realize that cracking the egg is damaged, you have to take a new one. So there's a process, but you also have to adapt to the environment. You have to make some changes along the way. Nothing is fully scripted, right? And in a way, this is very similar to when it comes to teaching a digital agent to perform a task with a user. Say, write an email to a customer and describe this new product line. This also requires a series of steps. It also means that some of these steps might fail. At some point, maybe the agent doesn't find the contact information of this customer and then needs to escalate back to the human for help. Unlike robotics that operates in the physical space, digital agents do function in the digital space. However, methodologies for building the brain and the planner, the orchestrator, with respect to robots and digital workers, have a lot of commonalities. And this is actually where I found a lot of the insights that I was having while working robotics has been transferred into the new space of digital workers.
I would imagine that in some ways programming robots is easier because they act in ways that are deterministic. You and I, we're messy. We don't act in deterministic ways. You don't always know what we're going to do given a certain set of recommendations. How does that inform? Is it harder to, quote, program humans with AI than it is to program robots?
But that's the thing, right? Programming robots still means that you need to come up with a plan which has to react to the environment. The plan itself might not be messy, but the environment is messy, right? So you might find a situation that the robots cannot perform this task because of some obstacles, because maybe the environment is adversarial. And similar here, when you design a flow, a process for an agent, you might encounter a similar situation.
One of the other things that we've taken into account when we're designing AI for humans is what could go wrong that might have unintended implications in potentially ways that could harm humans. Sometimes we talk about, the ethics of AI and being very cognizant of what could go wrong and how it might impact the end users. What's your perspective, or even your team's perspective, on what it means to exercise AI responsibly?
Yeah, in short, it means that we want to build and AI that it's safe for users to consume. So this is the short answer. The longer answer is we want to make sure that the AI is compliant while we define the trust AI principle. And this is actually the work that we are doing in collaboration with our partners in ethics teams, with Paula Goldman and other collaborators in Salesforce, where we really work closely to understand what are the most important principles to guiding a safe AI, a trusted AI. And some of the principles include, first of all, accuracy. So deliver verifiable results that can be balanced accuracy, precision, recalls of these models. So this is very important. And this is very important for enterprise because at the enterprise level, you cannot actually afford mistakes. So if you want to generate an email that advertises a certain product, you don't want to, tell wrong information about this product, right? So it has to be factually correct. This is very important. The second thing is about safety. So make all effort to mitigate biases, toxicity, any kind of harmful output. And this requires a lot of work behind the scene in conducting biases, explainability, and robustness assessment. And this is also where red teaming is very important, this kind of phase. It's also very important to protect the privacy of any information that can be potentially exposed during this in the process of generating content. And this is particularly true when it comes to generative AI because we don't know exactly what kind of content can be produced, and the type of data that we inject in the training process cannot absolutely contain any information, private information about users or customers. There's also an aspect of honesty and transparency. So when collecting data to train and evaluate models, we need to respect data provenance, ensure that we have the right consent of using data. So with customers, we definitely make sure that first of all, the default is that we don't use any customer's data for training, for building models. Mark Benioff has been saying, customer's data is not our product. This is something that we take very seriously. There are situations where we do have pilots with customers. In this case, the customers might opt in sharing some of the data, but we do make sure that this data is never used for training models because we never know how this generative model can spit out what we call regurgitate. It's not very appetizing word, but it actually makes the concept clear. So regurgitate the private data back to the output of a generative AI. Also, we care about empowerment, recognize cases where AI should play a supporting role to the humans, augmenting humans, helping humans in situations of where there is additional help, additional support. And finally, sustainability. This also happened to be one of the values of Salesforce, but we strive to build models which are not only accurate, but also have an opportunity for reduce or contain the carbon footprint.
Completely unsolicited compliment, but Salesforce is way ahead when it comes to AI trust and safety. Really good model. I'd encourage, we can put a link to this in the show notes, but the Einstein trust layer lays out a really good, really mature framework for how to think about these things. So I like the comment you made about Benioff and, customers' data is not our product. But through Einstein, you do let customers, I don't know if it's through RAG techniques or fine-tuning a model, et cetera, but you do let them introduce their own data that they own, which obviously can't then be shared with other tenants. My question is, one of the challenges that AI first vendors have these days is that there's a lot of credible finger pointing that can happen when something goes wrong. The customer says, Salesforce, I trusted you to not let the model whatever, hallucinate, introduce bias, etc. And the vendor, certainly not pointing a finger at Salesforce, but you can credibly say, we own the platform, we own the algorithms, we told you how to use it, but you introduced the data that had the encoded bias in it. Everybody's pointing a finger, and yet, ultimately it's the end user, the customer, et cetera, that ends up being, the unfortunate, kind of, where the outcome of these biased outcomes ends up the user suffers. How do you think about who owns ultimate responsibility when there's plausible deniability all around the table?
Yeah, this is an excellent point. But I think that what we need to, it's important to make a clear difference between the consumer space and the enterprise space. So to actually create separations between these two aspects, although of course there are some area of overlap in between these two spaces. But the thing is, most of the large language model that's been deployed has been very popular so far, has been dedicated for in the consumer space applications. And for instance, for companion AI or for as an assistant, you help me write an essay, let me find this kind of information from the web, give me a write summary for me. So this is, helping consumer in performing certain tasks, making them more productive, more effective, more efficient. And in this case, large language models are needs to absorb a lot of information, right? Because in order to be spans from one task to the other, in order to span from, let's say, literature to Shakespeare to, science to how to grow a bonsai, you need to have all possible knowledge in this planet. And typically, this knowledge comes from the internet. That's where how those large language models train from. So from internet data, some of this data, might be subject to some copyright laws that leads to some issues with some legal issues. Some other might contain some biases. Other might contain some toxicity. So at the end of the day, it's very difficult to control what the output can be when all the data gets fed into the models. In the enterprise space, the needs are different, right? You have very use case specific situation. The use cases are very specific. The tasks are specific. The domain can be specific, right? You operate in a CRM, you operate in a financial service, you operate in healthcare. So you don't have to include all possible, domains in one single model. So there's an opportunity for building models which are much more specialized. In fact, could be smaller than those large, huge, gigantic large language models. And when you build smaller models, you also have more control of the data that you use in training. So you still want to have this kind of conversational capabilities, which are important because that's what makes these models, this generative AI, effective in practice. This ability to converse with AI, which is new, which is the new breakthrough that we have seen over the past years. But at the same time, the type of output that we are expecting from the models can be aligned with a specific task. And in this case, again, you can use much smaller models and you can train those models in data that is much more controlled. So this allows us to have, to reduce hallucination, reduce toxicity, reduce biases, and align, those models with the customer's expectations. When it comes to privacy, that's actually is a different story. So we never use any customer's data for training models. The way the trust layer works in the Einstein 1 platform is that all the information, customer information, sits in data cloud, which is our own data platform, other infrastructure platform. And when there is a prompt, when there is a need for injecting some information, personal information, private information, this information comes from data cloud and is added to the prompt. And through grounding, through RAG, to these other techniques allows us to enrich the prompt, and then this gets fed into the model. And the model has a zero retainance, so it doesn't retain any information, any data that goes into the model. It's more like a faucet. All the water goes to the faucet. The only thing the model does is to regulate the flow of the model, but the faucet doesn't keep the water, right? So all the water goes through. The same thing here through these policies we establish with the external vendors or with our own models. The data doesn't sit in the model, is used for training. So there's no risk that this data the prompt gets used by in training. So then this allows us to preserve privacy, confidentiality, and then eventually after the model produces an output, there's another layer that checks for toxicity, for biases, for hallucinations. There is some very important approaches and methods that allows us to assess the confidence of the model to say, okay, I think that this is the answer, but I'm not sure 100%. In this case, I need extra human validation to assess the quality of the output. So these are some of the steps that we are making to ensure that we mitigate those issues as much as possible.
It's a really thoughtful answer. I've asked versions of that conversation a lot, and oftentimes you get answers that are not satisfying, but I like that approach.
Thanks.
So you've published good thought leadership around when to use a large model versus a smaller model. And I actually kind of teased that in the fun fact about the environmental footprint as it correlates to the size of the model. You made another good point that the larger the model, the more potentially toxic content might be in it that could have unintended consequences. Could you summarize maybe the current state of yours and your team's thinking about the trade-offs between large and small and what your research shows?
Yeah, absolutely. Large models are in general useful for generic conversational tasks, as I mentioned earlier. These are required in this kind of very broad applications. But one thing that it's kind of useful that makes those large models powerful is the fact that actually they can take any new task very quickly without much needs for fine tuning or for retraining, for instruction tuning. So they kind of we call it in our technical term zero-shot learning. So essentially, there is a new task for which you have almost zero examples, and then all of a sudden they know how to perform this task. And this is actually one of the powerful, in a way, this is one of the unpredicted behavior of those large language models. Something that at the beginning we didn't think it was possible, but actually turned out to be possible. And in a way, the reason there is a lot of excitement actually building bigger models, because you hope that these models can start being more, they can abstract new capabilities that you haven't necessarily planned at the beginning. So this is the good thing of large models. On the contrary, small models are useful when you know the task beforehand. So you know what kind of things you want to do. We know what kind of use cases we want to deal with. We know the kind of domains we want to operate upon. And in this case, building smaller models makes much more sense. So there's no need for to come up with to transfer. There is no need for operating in situations where the task is unpredictable. So it's what are the tasks, and we know that this model can be useful for that, right? In this case, we have seen that our experiment shows that if you reduce the scope of the task and you kind of focus on the specific task, you can achieve on-par performance or even better performance compared to larger models. And this actually, I feel that it was a big kind of conclusion that we found. And again, operating with small models has the advantage of increasing the training agility. We need less data. We have more control of the data that goes into it, but also the training process is simpler. It's less convoluted. Cost to serve, it's a big plus. So when you operate with the smaller models, both in training and inference, we need to deal with fewer parameters, which means also less expensive. We can run these models with the cheaper hardware, and we actually have seen, we have done a lot of studies that shows that smaller models can really give us a lot of computational saving. Also, latency is a big thing. So the larger the model, the lower these models are in response. And we have seen that sometimes these models cannot operate well in real-time situations where you need a faster reply. If you notice, often those big models produce an output through the technical streaming. So the answer is not produced, off the bat. The whole answer is not produced in one shot. It's not because there is actually a reason for that. The reason is because the model takes time to produce the answer, and then by streaming the answer slowly, you kind of pretend that you're saving compute time essentially, right? So you work on latency to make and it becomes less visible to the users. There are applications where you actually need to have smaller models. I'm thinking about mobile applications. There are a full area of application related to field service where actually having models on the device, on the client, on the cell phone, it's very important. Sometimes there is no access to the network because maybe those workers operating in an area where there is no network. Then running everything on the client is very important. In this case, you need to have small models. In my team, we build models which are as small as 3 billion parameters, which are better performant than comparable model, open source model in the same category. And of course, the footprint, right? So smaller models also has a much less impact to the environment.
You referenced earlier how AI should, or in many cases is being used to augment or complement humans. And yet you and I both live in a world, based on what we do, where there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of hand wringing in the call center and service desk automation about whether or not eventually AI will be able to replace these kinds of frontline workers. What's your perspective? If we look forward 5 to 10 years, I believe like me, you're on Team Human, you're an AI optimist. What do you think are the things that will never be able to be replaced by AI when it comes to the call center?
Yeah, so let me step back a little bit, and I want to illustrate a little bit what are the two trends that we have seen in the space of generative AI. So AI has been traditionally deployed for predictive tasks. So let's say I have a certain behavior, I want to see what happens next, right? Or I have some information I want to classify, yes or no, true, false. This is what AI has been used so far in the past, and we use some of these tools in Einstein. Einstein is making billions of predictions per year. So but these are predictions. These are type of tools I use in in tools in those platforms, and it's been essentially used for supporting human users to perform those tasks. JDI provides a set new of tools which are empower humans to be more efficient, more productive, more creative as well. So we have seen a lot of new tools for can also improve creativity, and those tools essentially are used as a single feature, if you wish. Write an email for me, write a summary for me. Build a new image that contains certain content. These are more like ad hoc tools, right? Then the space we are moving now, which is happening now, but it's going to be more and more prevalent, is the space of agents, right? And then we have here two directions that we have seen. One is what we call the digital assistants. These are helping humans perform tasks more easier, more faster, more easily, faster, more efficiently. And the thing is, not only they do things for you, but they also make actions for you, right? So it's not just they write an email for you, but they also make actions on your behalf. So when you say write an email and send it to this person, it's both writing an email, but also find the contact information, make sure that this person is available, send the email, look at the answer, summarize the answer to you, and get back to you. This is a serious task, similar to what we said earlier when we talk about digital workers, digital assistant. But this is actionable steps that AI takes on your behalf. But the goal is to assist you. It help you perform a task, and you can actually delegate this task to these assistants, and meanwhile you can do other things, right? And also those agents can be proactive in the future, can do things, on send alerts, or to do certain things to help you again make your work more productive, such as increase resource allocations if maybe, let's say, your compute device is running out of memory, let's say, right? So these are other things that this assistant can do, but again they are supporting the human user. The other direction is what we call digital workers. So digital workers are fully autonomous AI agents that perform tasks under the hood, in background, in full autonomy, right? These agents essentially are adding resources to organizations, and which has an opportunity to scale up operations and this can be done with very or kind of limited budget increase, right? And the tasks performed by these digital workers tend to be repetitive, tend to be, be implementing menial duties. These tasks tend to be very specific, very narrow. For instance, check if new content is available from my repository, create a summary batch time, and make it available if I need it. These are kind of things that happen in the background. They're done by digital workers, right? So here, there's an opportunity for humans to start, considering different roles and start organizing their works in different ways. So to act more like an orchestrator of digital workers. So imagine now that you have a fleet of workers that can help you do things on your behalf. And then your assistant can also help you do things. So then your assistant, more like chief of staff, helping you perform that, support your work. And then you have this fleet of workers that can do things on your behalf, right? So then your role has become more like an orchestrator, more like a manager that helps allocate into the resources and save me time on performing menial tasks, but same times, give me time to be more design, to think about other way of performing my job in a way that can be more effective, more empowering, and more interesting. But this requires different mindset, right? It require me, learn new skills, which also understand what kind of tool these tools can do for me, right? So it's understanding what AI can do, what AI cannot do, and when it can be trusted, when it cannot be trusted. So there's a lot of nuances here. It's not about just replacing work. It's about understanding, the limitation of AI, what the benefits of AI, and how we can take full advantage of those tools that are emerging in this kind of space.
So orchestrating digital workers requires, like you mentioned, a different set of skills, but also a different ratio of orchestrators to task owners, which is the current model. What do you recommend to, let's assume, there are a lot of call center agents that are going to be, quote, ratioed out of their current roles, but like me, you probably believe a lot of new opportunities will be introduced in that void based on some of these new technologies. What would your coaching be, let's say, to your kids, about what are the skills that are future proof that they can invest in to be the orchestrators of digital workers in the future?
Yeah, first of all, learn how to use these tools. Don't be scared. We have been saying to my kids that if you need help for doing your homeworks, you can use ChatGPT. It's fine. But of course, remember to verify the sources, verify that is trust, you're trusting, you're understanding where this information comes from. Verification is very important because remember, AI, it does hallucinate. The same here. So when I imagine, this new generation of workers, of employees that use AI need to know how to use these tools, at the same time also make sure that are still in control. When the capital needs to check, we have this panel and then verify that all the workflow is happening in the right way. Also, it doesn't mean that the user doesn't still has to be knowledgeable about this task. Because if at some point there is a situation of escalation to human needs to know what to do, right? Cannot be unprepared. And that's actually a risk that we are facing, that we become lazy. We don't really understand how things work. Actually, we need to fully understand how these tasks are done to potentially help in situations of escalation. But it does require, a different mindset, different framework for operate, which is interesting. It's still work in progress. I think still a lot of work to do to fully understand how to make progress here.
Something we might have to unpack in a future version of the conversation. It's very nascent, but it's an important topic. Now, Silvio, we're about out of time, but you're not getting off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me. Who are your role models and who's influencing the kind of thinking that you're doing that could have a corollary impact on millions of lives?
Yeah, this is a great question. I do follow carefully, what the other leaders in this space are saying. There are a lot of people that I do respect about their thought leaderships that I think they are making a loud voice about certain topics. I do think that there are a bit of situations where there are two camps. The more optimist, the more the pessimist camps in AI. Those that think that we need to be AI can lead humanity into situations of great danger, great risk, and those that are more optimistic. I do believe that actually I'm more in an optimistic camp. Actually, I wrote with the great collaborator here at Salesforce, with Peter Schwartz, chief futurist officer, an blog on AGI, and we definitely took a very positive approach to this topic. So we do believe that there is a lot of potential risks to this technology, but there is also great opportunities, and we need to advocate for these opportunities. When people talk about the more gloomy picture, I also think that it's more important to be more concrete instead of thinking about AI taking over the world and kills humans. I'm thinking about more what is the concrete area of focus we need to have, how to make today's AI trustworthy, right? How to make sure that the type of AI we're doing is safe to use, for our customers, our consumers to use AI, how to make it safe for our kids, most importantly, because this is the new generation of users of AI. So this is where we should put focus. And I've been very aligned with many of the voices in this space when it comes to emphasize the trustworthy aspects of AI.
A lot of people look to you and Salesforce as role models. So I appreciate all the good work that you're doing on topics of responsible AI, trust, safety, privacy, etc. So thank you to you and the team.
Thank you, Dan.
Good. Silvio, we're out of time. Where can the audience learn more about you and the work that your team's doing?
Yeah, we have a website where we have a lot of content, and I also have a page where I publish all my blogs. There is a lot of content that is aligned with what we discussed today, which I'm sure that your audience can benefit from reading. There is also a new blog that's coming up on AI agents, which I'm happy to share in the next couple of weeks. And so this is where definitely you can see a lot of great content for your readers, your audience.
We'll link to all those resources in the show notes. These are such important topics. We really just had time to get started. Hopefully, maybe you'd be willing to come back in the future as some of these conversations evolve.
Yeah, thank you. Then I'll be happy to answer any more questions in the future.
Appreciate that. Yeah, just such a pleasure. We are all rooting for you and the team to succeed.
Thank you. Likewise.
That's all the time we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.